Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Konstantin, and today I would like to talk about fundamentals of drawing. I know that you guys have all of those incredible ideas that you would like to visually capture. But in order to do so, you have to know how to draw. Now, any drawing begins with accurate proportions. Funny enough, that's what our video is about. We will be exploring the proportions by looking at bark plate and trying to accurately capture exactly what we're seeing. Now, let me make one point really clear. So, I don't want you guys to transfer the drawing or somehow mechanically measure every little tiny part and somehow put it, transfer it on paper or somehow transfer the angles or anything like that. Instead, I want you to rely purely on your observations and accurately capture what you've seen by the quality of your observation. And then you can check your eyes by using measuring tools and plumb lines and checking the angles and all of that. But those are secondary tools to actually check yourself. What truly makes you a better artist is the quality of your eyes and your observations. Now, with that, let's go ahead and get started and let's get better at proportions. Okay, so here the only few measurements that I would like to have at the beginning, just so I know my scale, is again very simply and very easily. I want to mark the top and the bottom. And then I also want to know where will specifically on the subject will be the middle point. I measured from the bottom of the neck to the top of the head. Now, it wouldn't be any different if you draw in a still life or a tree or any sort of landscape. It's still sort of quite helpful to determine the scale before you even begin and then divide that scale into the middle point. Sometimes it could be even helpful to have the widest point and see how that compares to your length. Um, Now, the first few things that we want to do is I want to look at the actual shapes that I'm seeing. And I want to see the whole subject that I'm drawing as one simple shape. And I want to capture it all at once. That's exactly the point why we are using a simpler subject, but we'll try to sort of see that simple subject as a whole from the start. I do believe that to truly understand something, you have to be able to see the whole thing. Now, the problem is when we start with the subject that is too complex right from the beginning, um, we're just not able to see the whole thing. And instead, we start breaking it into smaller and smaller pieces, and somehow the whole big image sort of slips away from us. It's almost like we're not seeing the forest through the branches. So here, I guess we're just choosing a smaller forest, right? Just so that way we could see the whole thing. And then we could sort of increase how much we could handle at once. Now, notice how none of my decisions are final. Instead, there are quite a few of the adjustments that I need to make. The way that I notice this sort of mistakes is very simple, actually. First, I want to have some sort of good amount of information that I can work with. When I have that, instead of just assuming that everything right and just moving forward hoping for the best, instead I squint really, really, really hard and I step back and I just start using purely just my eye and observation. And I ask myself, is any of those shapes looking different? How the overall shape of that mask looks like. I think we're looking at Lorenzo de Medici here. Then I ask myself, if I were to check, some of those larger shapes with a couple of their smaller shapes, does it still make sense? If we're looking at that sort of triangle of the nose, how does that shape relates to the overall shape of the head? And so on. So a lot of checking and measuring with my own eyes. Before moving forward, I want to be absolutely certain with all of the proportions. I'm also a little bit against that word rendering. I don't really believe in that much, and I also don't believe at taking too much time with this sort of type of drawings. I believe that if you accurately capturing the proportions from there, the process is actually pretty much straightforward and it shouldn't really take that much time. So I wouldn't advise you guys to take, weeks or a month or maybe years trying to complete this drawing. I think that's really not the point. I think the point is, first of all, capture accurately the proportions. Try to get really good at that. And then from there, modeling the form, and I think that's the better word than rendering, will just get so much easier. So, for example, notice that here, none of the shapes really looking any different. I feel like I'm quite identical here. And once I have that, and again, I don't even need to measure it to know it. I could just look back and forth, and just by using my eye, I should be able to know what's not working. Now, when I need confirmation, then I use a little bit of measuring. For example, something sort of looks a little funny, but then I measure it. And then the measuring confirms, what looks funny, right? It just gives you that additional layer of knowing what to do next. But I never sort of just purely rely on measurement. So here's very important distinction is that I don't want my drawing to be in any way sort of mechanical, right? Because the point of what we're doing now is that we want to learn how to see better. And by simply transferring the drawing or by simply mechanically measuring each part and transferring, we're just not going to get any better. So in the end, we sort of will be fooling ourselves. So that's not the point. But by using my own eyes, each time when I do that, and each time that I catch, any mistakes and sort of get better at overall proportions and placement, each time I get better. Ideally, if you do everything right, you should get at some point to the stage where you could absolutely accurately capture anything that is in front of you in a simple few lines and just capture it exactly as you see in it. Now, also, as you see, when I start applying the actual values, it makes it a lot easier to see. Often, of course, ideally, your drawing would be more accurate and more precise and also less messy if you could establish your proportions early on. So you don't need to adjust it. So by the time that you start applying the shapes, and values, your proportions are pretty much there. But also, often it's not the case. So, if you ever wondering, is it ever too late to adjust your proportions? I honestly think it's never too late. So, I think it doesn't matter how far you go, but you just want to work on the habit um, to always fix if something is wrong. And I do think that, no matter how well you could model your drawing and how much detail you can add, if anything wrong with proportions, I think nothing will sort of justify it. So placement and proportions in this sort of hierarchy, that stuff is above anything else. So we want to take care of that. As you can see here, I didn't have to do any of the adjustments. My drawing was pretty much close to what I was seeing. But if I would notice anything that needs to be adjusted, it wouldn't be such a big deal. Um, I also think that we want to develop good habits at not making big mistakes and little by little sort of making your drawing and even your first path more and more accurate. Because I do believe it actually takes more time to fix something than to get it right. And I feel like sometimes, when you see people taking, I don't know, weeks or months working on academic drawing, often it's just trying to fix this sort of loose block in. There's a quite interesting passage in Solomon J. Solomon book where he mentions that when you start a drawing with general and sort of loose blocking, then you sort of spend weeks trying to fix it. And his point was, just get it right from the beginning. And that actually makes a lot of sense. So I would say don't allow yourself to get away with inaccuracy, especially at the beginning. Try to get your drawing as accurately as you can. And I think what really helps with that, if you simplify the actual subject you're working on. So start with something that you could fully grasp at, just from that first path. Like, for example, start with bark plate or maybe simple still life with just an apple and a pear or something like that. Something that you can see from the beginning as a whole and accurately capture it. And then as you move forward, you can then go and complicate your subject bit by bit. What's really interesting, and I've heard Ruskin sort of mention it in his book, basically saying that anyone who starts drawing or painting will always want to start with the most impossible task. Let me draw like this, sunlight and the sunset, with the skies and the trees next to it and stuff like that. Or let me try to draw this multi-figure composition of epic battle or something like that. And I think drawing and painting is in the way also a humbling experience because you could have whatever dreams or ideas, but all of that will depend on how well you can execute. And I think your art could be truly interesting or captivating only if your skills and your ideas develop together. And I think one sort of very beautifully complements the other. So what you do with your hands make your mind to think better. And when you think better, your hands sort of work better. So I wouldn't separate, you as a thinker and you as a maker. I would say that those two things really just don't exist without each other. And that makes perfect sense. Often, some of those things like drawing from cast or copying the plates could be almost seen in the modern days as some sort of boring task, like something that is not interesting and not exciting and stuff like that. And that's just simply not true. It's almost like how can we say that learning the actual craft could be boring? For example, if you're doing something and you have a clear path to learn how to do it better, would that be boring? Probably not, right? If you're a scientist and there is some sort of clear path that you can take that could sort of fill you in on the things that were done before you, if you're excited about your actual subject, you would feel really excited about learning that, right? So here is actually the same thing. What we want to also realize that what we're doing now is not any sort of creative project. Instead, we're just trying to get better at our actual craft. So that way we could be creative with more knowledge and more confidence. So here, um, also, I'm thinking to get as close to the original as I can. Now, this drawing was completed in one session, probably like less than 2 hours. And really, what I've noticed is that we again spend the most time, first of all, trying to get the proportions right, And then also, if we miss something at the beginning, it sort of creates this sort of like domino effect. Like it then makes so difficult to change it, and then we afraid to move forward because we believe that there is something wrong at the foundation, and stuff like that. But notice how the moment that we got everything on point, it's sort of like we build a very nice foundation, and everything else just very nicely falls into place. I also what I'm doing here is that by copying exactly what I'm seeing, I'm learning what sort of different edges and different forms we see in nature. For example, you could see that some of those edges, let's say on the cheekbone or in some places on the forehead, are a little bit on the softer side. Then in some other places where the form is turning away from the light more abruptly, it is a little bit more on the sharper side. And so I'm jumping my eye and I'm comparing the edges to each other. And I'm asking myself, what is this edge in relationship to that? Or I ask myself, how dark is this halftone in relationship to something else? So I'm still trying to keep that whole idea in mind. What I really like about Bark is that knowledge is very beautifully structured and organized. So I do like to use that as an example to sort of perfecting your proportions and understanding, those sort of concepts about, visual information that is in front of us. I think it's just great for that. At the same time, I don't think you can learn absolutely everything for it. And also, it's not like people didn't know how to draw before Bark. There were plenty of other things that you could learn from. For example, copying Holbein or copying, old masters or plates. But I do think that throughout the time, it has always been in part of drawing and painting education on copying the plates and copying the masters. I think it's just so much that you can learn from it. Now, think of it this way. You often hear that idea, draw what you see or paint what you see. But the problem here is that you only can see what you were taught to see. And by copying classical examples, both from sculptures and plates and paintings and classical drawings, you learning how to see the world through someone else's eyes and seeing all of those different interpretations. You learning where to look, and how to draw that. Because in nature you have so much information that you have to know how to approach it, how to select it, and how to capture it. So with that, that will be it for today's drawing. Thank you so much for joining. You guys let me know what you think about copying the masters. What has your experience been with copying plates and sculptures and stuff like that? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Now, if you guys could support the channel and leave the comments below and subscribe and leave the like, I would highly appreciate that. It's so much work to put those videos together, so any support is highly appreciated. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining and take care.